All right, good afternoon, everybody. I think this is the last day of my fill-in duties for Mackenzie Peterson, who is out in Southern Florida by
Oh,
you,
nice.
South Beach. They are quite literally at a financial advisor conference, quite literally on the sand.
Oh,
So,
She's here for future proof.
yeah, absolutely. So she's
Oh,
down
nice.
there. One of our investment consultants is down there. Eddie's down there trying to sell some of his ETF. So yeah, they've been there. I was going to say burning up in the sun, but it sounds like you guys have had some cool mornings out there for a while.
Weather's been perfect, actually.
Yep.
The weather could not have been better in South Florida to have a conference on the beach,
Nice.
like they've done. I didn't. That's great. I'm actually curious to hear Mackenzie's sentiment with the appetite for RIAs or financial professionals around MSOS and the ETF, especially cannabis and psychedelics.
Yeah, and the last version of the conference that we went to was in California, so not surprisingly, a very friendly venue to have those kind of conversations. And in fact, I think they'd had some Curaleaf hemp drinks at the booth there.
Okay.
Um, and so, yeah, I'll be curious to see what the feedback is from Florida. And it's a great example, right? I know people talk about the ETF and they talk about the price action, they talk about the lack of redeems, and sometimes I want to raise my hand and say, we're spending money and working our ass off to to find new investors in this
Yeah.
space, and going to these events and being able to sit face to face and have these kind of conversations and understand their concerns and objections and things like that, and to a certain extent helping them overcome them or seeing the space maybe in a different way is what we're trying to do every day, and get more advisors excited about this space, right? They're not loading their entire portfolios in, but making smart allocations in what I'd call easily an alternative investment category. Makes a lot of sense. So you just got to have a
Yeah.
sensible conversation with financial advisors, and most of them will get it.
Yeah, and I mean, for my early days in the cannabis space back in 2014 and 2015, high net worth individuals and professional investors, they enjoyed the conversation around having cannabis as part of their portfolios. And you nailed it, as an alternative investment.
Yep.
It was a conversation piece. They were investing in the new sexy thing on the block, and like we call it a CPG macro trend. I think that we're going to get that back, but we need to get past this extreme uncertainty that's going on right now, as far as the regulatory, as far as a lot of things. Once we, I think, overcome that hurdle, that notion of cannabis is, I don't want to call it the hot new alternative investment, but the interest will come back
Definitely.
into the space.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Um, and it really is that example where, remember, for a while, and this is maybe 5 or 6 or 10 years ago, maybe somewhat current, but they would talk about unicorns coming to market, right? And then there was some
Yeah.
complaining of, oh, regular investors don't get the opportunity to invest these companies when they're young because they stay private and they wait and they wait and they wait and they wait. And then boom, they're multi-billion dollar, plus offerings in the marketplace. And it's only the early investors and the private equity who got in there. And you see that way down in the life cycle of this company, where you didn't have to ride all of that up and down in the early difficult stages and finding clients and things like that.
Yeah.
And this is a little bit, I mean, with a lot more complexity. This is a little bit of what that looks like, except now you've got a market genuinely pricing, mark to market, what these companies should be worth, right? It reminds me of what WeWork went through in terms of the valuation private equity. And then the market comes in and like, this is worth something a lot different.
Yeah.
And then it's coupled with, the obvious insanity of, our federal policy, OTC traded, and all of that just only makes it that much more difficult. But it's alternative, and it's a view of what early private equity investing looks like when the market can price it. And you've got people with varying trading strategies around these stocks as well. So interesting
Yeah.
space.
Yeah, I think too, it's just we're at an immense time of uncertainty, and we're going through some growing pains within the industry. I look a lot back on the tech boom and the first entrepreneurs that were out of the gate. Let's say AOL, was it Netscape? Those companies
Yeah.
aren't around anymore. They were the
Yep.
darlings, and they were the hot items first out of the gate. They were the pioneers of the tech boom, and we might need to rethink some things in the industry. We might need to rethink some of these models.
Right.
Cannabis isn't going anywhere. That's for a fact. It's going to keep growing. It's going to keep going up and to the right. It keeps getting more popular. And a lot of people need to realize the medical implications that could happen in the United States, and what kind of growth that
Right.
can spur. That being said, I mean, obviously, we saw a little bit of a retraction in top line revenue from a lot of the MSOs and earnings, with the exception of, I think, GTI, that was up 6%. year over year. There's still some major markets to unlock. You got PA, VA, Florida, sometime 26, 28 story. There's still a narrative developing around this industry. This industry is not dead by any means.
And even with the revenue, slope kind of changing a bit, what I really tried to focus in on with the, decreasing pricing and efficiency that comes there is trying to look at unit sales and seeing if that's seeing the growth that we want to see. And I think in part you do see that. So, even that's a more natural kind of environment. That's just, it's a commodity at its core. You'll find efficiencies with it. And then the margins will be, how do you take a commodity like coffee and then could become the Starbucks, version of it, or a commodity like sugarcane and be the Coca-Cola version of that. And I think you're right. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's brand and it's about distribution. And I think you're right. We'll see, the Netscapes of the world in this space, but you'll see the Amazons of the world that had, I forget the number, but 90% drawdowns, and the only people that made billions upon billions of money, right? Mark Yusko always talks about this, is Jeff Bezos and his family, right? That just held on. And dollar cost average, I guess, through stock options and grants and things like that along the way. And I think that will be the space, wild speculation on my part, but markets do often rhyme. So see how it goes.
Yeah. Right? I mean, I do think that there's a lot of value creation left to be made in the cannabis industry. I agree. I think you need to know what you're owning. I think that it's very important to understand leverage, even though when you do listen to some of the institutional guys in the space, Peter Sack on his earnings call with Chicago Atlantic, he referred to the debt maturities, and he was like, it's really overblown by the retail market and on Twitter. Like, yes, these maturities, some of them are coming due, some of them are going to be dilutive to a certain extent, but they're not existential to a lot of these companies. Some of them are in a bind as it relates to their relationship with their financiers, but it's not. It's overblown to a certain extent. It's going to be part of the process, part of those growing pains that we're talking about, and part of getting through to the other side. It's just when you pair them with price compression and with maturing markets and seeing some of the revenue roll over, everything starts to compound, and then people kind of are looking around and they're like, what am I still doing here? I think it's really important to be able to look at the companies, maybe even start to look at what they would be doing if they were paying 280E, or if 280E goes away, to come to your certain conclusions and assumptions, and just take your investment thesis from there. But I think it is important that people thoroughly need to understand these companies, not just listen to like what we say, not listen to what other people are saying in the industry from an informational perspective. Really look at this and develop your own opinions and theses based on your own research. And that's really important, because cannabis companies are complicated. They're very complicated.
Cannabis ETFs are complicated.
Correct, which isn't a whole other conversation. Right. I mean, that I stay out of. I mean, I know a decent amount about capital markets, but when people start to get into the fringe theories around some of the products in this space, I kind of just prefer to keep my mouth shut and stay out of it, because there's not a lot of there's lacking validity to a lot of the claims.
Well, and back to your point about Chicago Atlantic and the point relative to debt, I also feel like it's this sort of positive double whammy. One, I don't see the debt as being nearly as cumbersome, right? But when, whatever we get the fixes, it is a lower cost of capital for these companies. And then fixing the 280E piece, then the cash flow piece is dramatically changed. And even with all of that being said, I'd be okay with, and I don't know, it's not really flattening revenue growth, but if I can see customers and unit sales continuing to fly like Amazon did, right? Take market share from the illicit to the legal market, and don't worry about the profitability as much. I know it's important, but investing that capital, get the customers, get that user base away from, just garbage that they're seeing in a variety of different places. And holy cow, it creates a nice opportunity for these companies. And again, not something that you should be logging your entire portfolio into. Be smart. It's an alternative investment category. But to the extent that, you're like me and maybe you that believe in the space, you see those opportunities, but volatility ahead, buyer beware, all those standard warnings.
Yes. I mean, there definitely is volatility. I mean, the illiquid nature of a lot of these stocks, I mean, just adds to it. It really is paramount that you need to look at what the prices are doing on days with high volume versus days with lower volume to actually see where the market dynamics are. But it's really hard to make a a really, really well-informed decision on any of these stocks, because they can pop and then they bleed down. Or they can be stagnant for weeks, and then you see something pop on something like the Marijuana Moment article about Trump's staffer getting a potential proposal on what federal legalization would look like. The market moved on that, which I thought was crazy, to a certain extent, a little bit overdone. But that's obviously signs of a maturing industry. Like when we're shielded from that and you're not really seeing anything moving on that, we're really out of the speculation phase and we can see where this is going, I think you're going to see the market react a lot more rationally, especially when we can get things such as uplisting down the road.
An uplisting in custody is key. I mean, this is just a space that needs far more buying pressure, than what it has relative to selling pressure. Right now, it doesn't take a lot of money to move the stocks around. We just had Trent on and we're talking about, Youngkin and, what he's going to do relative to the legalization bill on his desk. But even that, I look at it, right? My expectations are he's going to probably veto it. I hope not. I'd like to stay optimistic, but if I had to place money, he's going to veto it.
Oh, yeah.
And that's going to leg down again, right? I mean, it's just so headline driven right now that if we can get a more mature investing space, fingers crossed, all that stuff.
I also think, and we don't talk about it enough, we need to educate people on the cannabis industry. And I mean, by educating people on the cannabis industry, I mean, we need to have public service campaigns such as what Sam does, but to the contrary, using science, data, and real life examples as to what the actual state-run legal cannabis industry is doing, what the hemp industry is doing to an extent, and what this actually looks like from a 360 point of view. Because I really don't think a lot of people understand the nuances of what's going on as far as rescheduling, as far as what the hemp industry is doing, as far as how many patients the state legal cannabis businesses are reaching. Because cannabis, if I'm being frank, it's accessible in this country. You talk to people about legalizing cannabis and they're like, oh, what does that even matter to an extent? Yes.
They're getting it mailed to them.
Correct. From a virtue standpoint, it's a great cause because it obviously it keys into libertarian principles and being able to have autonomy and do what you please from a freedom perspective. But in most states, I can go get cannabis, whether it be medical, whether it be THCA and in a temp form, or whether it be adult use. Cannabis is accessible in the United States. The problem is we need reform for the formal industry and the state-run industry, or the access to the plant is going to diminish over time because 280E is killing these companies, whether we want to admit it or not. It is kind of the canary in the coal mine.
And we're, it seems like minutes away from something bad in the gas station hemp industry, no different than VapeGate, that is just going to cause, a negative stain across the entire category. And to your point, people won't really understand if they're not educated. We haven't educated them well enough. They won't understand the nuances, but important, very distinctive, differences. I shouldn't use the word nuances. That minimizes it. The meaningful differences between the two. But it won't matter to most people. They'll think about it in exactly the way that you described.
It doesn't. And that's why I've been so vocal in regards to the synthetics and certain aspects of the hemp industry, because THC in the eyes of THC is THC, whether it's derived from hemp or whether it's derived from cannabis sativa. THC is the same thing. If a child gets a hold of a gummy, or if a child gets a hold of a chocolate bar that is infused with cannabis, the media, Sam, CNN, Fox News, are not going to make the differentiation that came from X. It's going to be cannabis edibles, cannabis did this, and it's going to create repercussions that we're going to have to deal with. And I don't want to relive VapeGate. The whole vitamin E acetate and VapeGate thing was a black cloud over the entire industry. We thought an entire form factor was going to get relegated from the space with VapeGate. I mean, I don't want to live that again, and that's why I think we need to be we need to get louder on educating the public on actually what is going on, and also see a concerted effort from people that are from the good actors, companies like Hometown Hero in the hemp industry, and the major MSOs and the major state-run operators in the United States, and have them come together and create a concerted effort to educate the public and lawmakers on what an actual efficiently regulated THC market should look like in the United States and what is currently going on today and how we can shield ourselves from any risk with what's going on as an industry.
Yep, makes sense. We are definitely in an agreement there. But yeah, the cannabis companies also have to invest their time and money and effort in that. If they're not leading,
they have to lead. They
I know.
they have to lead. I mean, we obviously have our own respective voices and we have our own respective platforms, but at the end of the day, you saw Charlie and Kim. They were in the room at
Right.
the inauguration and at Trump's dinner. Those are the leading voices in the cannabis industry. Charlie, Kim, Boris, Ben,
Yeah.
Brady from Sunburn. There's several other prominent voices in the space, and I mean, it's their job and it's their responsibility. We can obviously support and amplify, but at the end of the day, if they're not conveying the message and or streamlining the message and
Right.
getting it in the right rooms, it's falling on deaf ears. Because unfortunately, a lot of the large accounts and a lot of the large voices within cannabis, when you look at YouTube, when you look at Instagram, when you look at TikTok, they're all accounts that have leverage to the illicit market. They're all accounts that have leverage to, let's say, some of the predominantly bad actors in the hemp space.
Right.
They don't want our money. They don't want to give us their time, and they sure as hell don't want to give us their voice.
Right.
That's a big problem when it comes to comms, because we need to go on the conservative media spaces and conveying the responsible approaches to marijuana.
And we're in an environment, certainly with the current administration, where an elevated voice does get attention.
Absolutely.
And so tap into what seemingly is working. So yeah, definitely. You and
I keep saying this, and it's like, we really actually need to do this, is bring all the MTC employees to Mar-a-Lago. Have them set up in front of Mar-a-Lago. That, as far as I'm concerned, I think that is one of the only ways you are going to get Donald Trump's voice.
Right.
That and or start to align with Byron Donalds, who's going to be running in the gubernatorial race in 2026, because I think cannabis is going to come up in that race. The candidates are probably going to have to give their positions on that, and we need to see support, and that's going to be a counterpoint if he wants to stand up against DeSantis.
Yeah,
or Casey DeSantis potentially.
That's right. Yeah. Tapping into the media, right? I mean, I know Don hits on this a little bit about walking the hallways and, not bumping into a lot of cannabis people there. Boy, that's, it's unfortunate. And again, I'm not asking for the CEOs to be there on a day in, day out basis, but when there's meaningful things going on or a meaningful hearing that's relative to it, if 3 or 4 or 5 of the biggest CEOs were doing exactly what you described, even for Mar-a-Lago, the press is there, you're going to get interviewed, right? Just keep the pressure on. And really zero in on the part where you started, which is the education and understanding the real differences.
Absolutely. And if you look at someone that cares, it's like Kyle Sherman from Flow Hub. He did the work. He showed up in DC. He's wrote testimonials to be submitted into the record. He's doing things to further the cause and to create awareness around what's going on. I'll be there Tuesday with Don and Gretchen on the Hill. And then there's a conference on Wednesday that I'm attending. That'll be a bunch of European lawmakers and European executives from the cannabis industry. Kind of get some insights as to what's going on across the pond and be able to get, I guess, best practices as to what they're doing and what really is going on in the U.S. So it should be a couple interesting days in DC.
I won't be in town, but Mackenzie will be. So if you guys have time to stop by Bethesda, come on by.
Yeah. I'll definitely, it's going to be a quick trip. With the baby, I got to be in and out. I can't be doing 3-night trips anymore. So I'm in Monday or Tuesday morning and I'm out Wednesday evening. Back to South Florida.
That sounds good. Well, you guys are always welcome to set up shop in the office if you need some space or just a space to drop your gear for a day or two.
Okay.
We actually have a planned agenda for this thing. I don't know how far we'll be able to get through it, but I think the idea of what we wanted to do today was almost a bit of a cannabis awards show. I know relative to price action, handing out awards isn't what's on top of people's mind. But I thought, one, it would be good to sort of focus in on some positive attributes within the industry, what companies are sort of leading that. I'll give a caveat and disclaimer. We just sort of ran the idea by each other yesterday. I'm going to be asking you the questions. You're going to name a company or two. It doesn't have to be just one that you like for a particular category that you'd hand the award to. Not to say that there's not plenty of other awesome companies who are
Yeah.
just as deserving for the award. So if Anthony doesn't mention your company, it's okay. He might still love you. But I just thought it'd be interesting to walk through. You talk to a lot of executives in the space, pick your brain on a bunch of different categories and see what you think. Does that sound good?
100%. I'm all for it.
Let's start with the best place that we can from an investor perspective. Cannabis company with the best financials.
If I don't say GTI, people are going to think I have an axe to grind against Ben.
They're going to throw tomatoes at you.
Yeah.
And they do. Firstly, with size and best financials, it's a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer. Ben and Anthony have built the best business in the cannabis space. They pay taxes. They make money. They've grown their top line. They have stable margins. They have great presence in most of the states that they're in. My only gripe with them is they need to improve their product in Florida as it relates to what they're growing in this state. I'm sure they'll get to this state if and when we go adult use, and they need to put more emphasis on it. But there's nothing negative you can really say about GTI. I would say True Leaf is a close. Yeah, I would say True Leaf is a close second. People want to talk about the tax liability and some of the balance sheet, but Kim owns Florida. Kim's going to continue to own Florida. And she's got PA and a couple things coming up, but yes, I would have to say undoubtedly it's GTI.
Is there an honorable mention in the, call it tier three or whatever, smaller cap cannabis space? They're all small cap, but is there any honorable mentions on the smaller side worth mentioning?
I would say CXXI.
Okay,
CXXI. I mean, they've paid down debt. They're operating pretty well from a free. Yeah, see, Jungle and Java agrees, or Jane agrees with me. They've built a great business. I'd like to see them be able to export that discipline and export that business into other markets. I actually got into a conversation a couple of days ago about what is the blue sky within the business. Like, obviously the Nevada focus is great, but do I want to be deploying my money into a true single state operator, regardless of the financial discipline and the company that they've built? I'd love to see them export that and start to build out a footprint. Maybe they're waiting, but yes, fundamentally, you can't say a bad thing about the company that they've built either.
Right. And the awesome thing about the companies that do have great financials, big or small, when things open up and people are looking for where they want to allocate capital, to your point, give it to people who can rinse and repeat in different locations and let them create value.
Capital allocators, I do think that's a good point. I do think new capital allocators that are going to come into this space, let's say on the back end of reform, they are going to look at your track record. They are going to look at the discipline within the company. And that is going to be a pretty interesting data point moving forward as to where the capital does go.
Agreed. Yeah, absolutely. Next category, and now that I'm saying this, I should maybe clarify, but I wrote best brand, but maybe think about it from two different aspects if you want. Best brand at a high level, meaning company-wise, Juicy, Green Thumb, whoever, and then maybe, what product, individual product line maybe you think has the best brand. And by best, I mean sort of well-known, does a good job marketing and positioning, their company or a specific product brand. So maybe at two levels, who would you mention under the best brand category?
I don't want to be a homer here again, but brand, you have to say Sunburn in Florida. Brady's built a powerful brand. I don't see people walking. I don't see people. I mean, I'm wearing one of the hats. It's the only cannabis brand I'll actually wear. It's Florida cannabis. It's ingrained in Florida. It was something I was saying 10 years ago. We need a Florida cannabis business to come out of one of the MMTCs. Obviously, when you think about the Florida market, you think about True Leaf, you think about Move, you think about some of the other operators here. But from a brand perspective, and when I'm walking around Fort Lauderdale, what logo do I see people wearing? I see people wearing Sunburn attire at the gym in the morning. To me, that is a brand. He's built a lifestyle. They're doing experiential stuff at surf tournaments. They're doing experiential stuff when they open up their dispensaries. I actually went with Brady to Panama City when they opened it up, got to see one of the community events and what they do to actually get the community engaged. He's built a brand. So as far as that, I would have to say it's Sunburn. And I'm obviously a little bit biased towards Florida, but Sunburn would be that. As far as products go, I don't think anyone does it better than and again, this is a Florida company that was just, there's an LOI out for an acquisition with Varrell. I'd have to say the Flowery. The Flowery, the way that they do their product drops, for instance, with 710, they do a very similar mechanic like sneaker drops. So they send out an email, you're on their green list, you get a code, and you then go purchase the products online, and then you could pick them up at the dispensary or get them delivered. Their products are the best flower in Florida when it comes to 710 Labs, Wizard Trees. They do great marketing. They do great graphics and stuff for their launch, and their product is second to none. I'd have to go with the flowery with Wizard Trees and 710 Labs as far as their flower goes in Florida.
Nice. I like it. So let's get into the legislative side of things. Which company, and I've got best state strategy and best federal strategy. And I guess I would ask you to think about it in terms of who's positioned the best from a state perspective, who's positioned the best from a federal perspective, but then also who do you feel like does the best job at leading the charge either in a particular state or certainly at a federal level?
This is a loaded question. This is a really loaded question.
States, I think, tougher, right?
State's very tough because I hate to harp on Florida again, but I can't talk about really Amendment 3 due to it not passing and it being very, very heavy in terms of spend. I wouldn't go company. I would say organization. I think Michael Bronstein and Attach are doing a great job in Pennsylvania from a grassroots perspective. I think, Jushi with Trent and the way that he is moving the needle in the Pennsylvania market. I really do think we get Pennsylvania done this year. And I think it's because of groups like that with Jushi and Attach being there very much so from a grassroots standpoint. And I know from a lobbying standpoint in PA, I think there's been $1.6 million deployed with Kim leading the charge in terms of capital deployed in that state. So I would look for PA as far as state strategies that are working because they've actually got the governor being loud about it. They have Senator Street and Senator Laughlin bringing together common sense bills. It's looking like they're actually going to be able to get the state legislature to come to terms and get something done this time around. So I would have to give it to Pennsylvania, and notable mention would be Michael Bronstein from Attach and Trent Woloveck from Jushi.
Nice. Awesome. Very good. Just very quickly, these are categories we're probably not going to cover. But thanks, JT, for the suggestions. And so best federal, is that Kim or who would you say? And Truly?
I'd have to say Kim and Charlie because they're showing up and doing the work. I know there's a couple other people behind the scenes that are doing things on the federal level, which I can't really talk about right now until those come to fruition. I think Jason Wild has been doing, actually, that's a good point. Jason Wild's been involved in PA. And Jason Wild is, I know, having conversations on the federal level
pushing
as well.
His own
so
campaign.
I'd have to say Kim, Charlie, and Jason. I know I saw Ben was representative at the DNC. I haven't seen Ben really do much around the federal conversation publicly. I'm sure he's doing stuff behind the scenes and conversing with individuals to further the cause. I hope he is to further the cause of what we're doing from a federal level. With what they're doing at Green Thumb.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And given his family background and history, he's one of the better people to speak to those things.
Very, very much so.
Getting close to JT's category, I do have best hemp crossover. So I guess there I'm sort of looking for someone who's actually in the cannabis space, but now starting to move into the hemp space. Who stands out for you as doing a good job at starting to navigate that?
So crossover, I got to go Wana Brands with their beverages and with their edibles. They just entered Texas. I think Joe understands his consumer. Joe Hodis over at Wana, I think understands his consumer. His beverages are one of the best beverages that I've had. The balance with THC and CBG, and then it's uplift, or I forget what the actual verb is, but it's THC and THCV. They both have CBD in them. I'm not a fan of any of these straight Delta 9 THC beverages. I think you need the minor cannabinoids in there for the experience as it relates to consuming it. I think Joe's doing a great job at Wana. Kiva as well, which is a legacy brand in the traditional cannabis space. They have the best gummies. They have tons of form factors. They taste good, smell good, effect is good. That's another great crossover from the traditional cannabis industry into the hemp space. And if we're talking a pure play hemp, I think Cantrip is doing a great job. I think Adam Terry is super sharp. They're starting to get into experiential, which I think you need to meet your consumer where they're consuming. That's very important. They just had a bus that they actually had built with Cantrip branding all over it, and they were busing people around Nashville during the weekend. I think he's one of the brands
Todd
that's
and the
going to
Tempter
win.
guys are starting to do a good job of that as well, I think.
Yeah. So Tempters, I've never got the chance to try. But I do know that I see Todd marketing Tempters, and I know that Tempters is one of the brands up there. But yeah, I think Adam Terry's doing a bang up job with Cantrip, and the way that they're progressing through the stores, they're probably going to be one of the ones that win overall within the hemp beverage space.
Yeah, I think he does also just a great job online in terms of, talking to people, being very transparent, right? Anyone who's willing to put their time out there, I think is a good thing. I might know where you're leaning with this next one, but I did just have sort of generically best overall leadership, right? Which of these firms do you say, not just the CEO, but, sometimes the real work's really done at that executive team and management team. Who is, driving the best execution across the board, I would say, right? Not just financials, not just legislatively, but with growth, with stores, with employee retention, any of those things that come to mind.
So I have to say Charlie and Cresco. The reason being, I know that their top line revenue has slipped. I know that people had reservations around their last earnings print, but what he's done with his year of the core and getting the business turned around, getting Florida turned around as far as everything goes, he's done a bang up job with what he set out to do. So I would have to say with C-suite and with what he's done from a leadership perspective, I'd have to say Charlie and Cresco.
Okay. Though that's interestingly enough, my second category, or not really second category, but the category after leadership, what is best turnaround, right? And I'll use turnaround in sort of air quotes, right? Meaning there's certainly been companies that were seemingly on a very difficult trajectory that have made that turn. Now, is it completely turned around for these companies? All right, probably not. I get it. But just in general, I think you get the point. Who's done a good job at changing the direction, maybe in terms of where they might have been heading before?
I'd have to say Charlie and Cresco with like what I said with the year of the core. I think there's two assets out there that have the chance to own this category. Let's say if we're having this conversation a year from now, I think it's the cannabis and air. People want to see that story turned around. People want to see them. People are cheering for them to come out of to come out of this intact. Also, I think an honorable mention is Ascend. Ascend's last quarter, their wholesale business was up tremendously. They do seem like they're turning it around with the original founders getting back into the fold. TerrAscend has been steady. I wouldn't say TerrAscend really is a comeback story. Ziad and Jason are disciplined. They're owning New Jersey. They're stable in New Jersey. They've got PA that's going to flip. I wouldn't really call them a turnaround story per se. They've been slow and steady for the past 2-3 years now.
Nice. I like it. And then my last one, which depending on your answer could generate a handful of phone calls for you, is who would you say is the best M&A target right now? If you were coming in shopping, if you could write a big check, who's at the top of your list? Again, not the only one you would pick, but just what's the first one that comes to mind if you had a large checkbook?
The best M&A target, if I was going to take over a cannabis company today, I would take over Air. 100%. Wow. They've got Florida. They've got PA. They're in several other markets. Obviously, the balance sheet is gives you a little bit of a pause due to their debt situation and the need to refi. They've got a lot of leverage, but they're in good markets. I'm just going to talk bluntly here. I'm not a fan of their brands. I'm really not a fan of their brands. They have Kiva that they brought into Florida, which I think was a masterful move. I think Kiva does well. Air lives on vapes and edibles in Florida. I'm not a big fan of their cannabis brands, and I mean it just is what it is. I'm being honest there.
So you'd buy it, but you'd work on product development there.
I'd overhaul the entire thing. I'd rebrand. I'd reskin everything. As far as the operation goes, but they have pretty nice assets in that portfolio. They've got the Virginia license too, which obviously it's going to take a decent amount of capex to build out as they won that license in the expansion. But if I got the keys to that and I had capital and I was, let's say, going to do a takeover and had the money to do a complete overhaul, I would scoop up Air, especially in the condition that they're in right now.
Right. How much, if if you were a buyer of a company, how much does the other infrastructure part of the company matter? Their grow, their processing facilities? Or do you feel like sort of in the future that's going to be minimized more, less, more? Or is that, I mean, for you, especially as a quality flower guy, that's still got to be an important part of a brand, right?
Very important. I think if you look at guys like Jason Vidati that have done it twice now, he
Hmm.
did Harvest, got it acquired, went with Story. Story's predominantly retail.
Hmm.
Retail, I don't want to call it easy, but it's the moneymaker. Let's say on the value chain,
Yep.
and like you had alluded to at the beginning of the podcast, cannabis is somewhat becoming commoditized from a
Hmm.
flower perspective. If I don't have to own the cultivation assets and I don't have to process the cannabis, if I can create solid contract manufacturing relationships and then also be able to install SOPs and control the quality of the flower that's coming out of the grow rooms, let it be it so. I'd rather run a retail organization than run a vertically integrated cannabis business where I
Right.
have to worry about all of the cogs. But I do agree with you. There's a fine line there because you have to be able to control QA QC, and
Hmm.
the only really real way to control your destiny is then controlling the cultivation assets.
Right.
So it's a tough balance there. But
Yeah.
yes, I would have to say leasebacks would also be a certain data point as per which company I'd like to take over.
Right.
Some of those contracts, as we're seeing, they become onerous over time.
Yep.
The way that they were underwritten at the beginning, they're not sustainable right now with the way we've seen price compression and the price of flour
Right.
come down, especially when you want to talk about the equilibrium of price compression and overall leverage on the business. There's a certain point where that falls out of favor, especially if these businesses are not generating cash flow.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I think of things like, if you were to ask someone who makes the best coffee, someone like McDonald's doesn't really show up on their radar. But when you have people blind taste tests who has what taste they like the best, McDonald's ranks high and they have buying power, right? So they can get
Yeah,
access to the best coffee beans. And so it makes sense that if you can create size and brand, of course, from a distribution perspective, you can still have, you can decide to buy a bunch of average, mediocre, low price stuff, or you can use your size and dominance to buy some of the best stuff.
correct.
And then I guess work on brand, of course, from there. So, oh,
Correct.
interesting.
Brands everything. I think brand is going to become increasingly more important
Right,
down the road, especially in a market like Florida that's medical right now. Brand is everything.
right.
If you lose your customers, they're probably not coming back
How,
um,
how about
in this
this for a
market.
wild speculation question? So your company with the best brand of sunburn, do you think they ever go public or they're just acquired at some point?
I think
Total guess, I know.
Brady's enjoying the ride right now
Yep.
with the business. I know he thoroughly enjoys what they're doing right now. He enjoys Florida. I think they want to expand maybe at a later date into some of the Southeast.
Yep.
He's done the public stuff with Bluma and being acquired by Cresco. I don't want to
Yep.
speak for him, but I know that there's certain things that come with being public versus
Sure.
certain liberties
Yeah.
that you have with not being public.
Right.
I don't think he takes it public anytime soon, unless there's a very good offer. But they're building slow and steady in the state. Their customer base is just building slow and steady in the state, and the quality's there.
Yep.
They have very sticky customers. We were there last week shooting the episode with
I saw
Shad.
that.
9 o'clock in
Yeah.
the morning, there were customers just coming through the till
Nice.
all morning. So I mean,
That's awesome.
he's got his customers. He inherited a hell of a retail presence in
Hmm.
Florida. Those one thing MedMen got right was the aesthetic of their retail locations.
Yep.
They were sited very good. They're in marquee locations,
Yep.
and they're very very easy retail to run,
Nice.
which is a good solid data point for Sunburn.
Yeah, they are definitely ones I would love to see as an option for investability in the ETF. But at the same time, if I were him, I don't think I'd certainly in the current environment, I would not be in a rush.
So I do think we'd be having a different conversation though if Amendment 3 passed.
Oh,
If Amendment 3 did pass, I thought he was
yes.
going to be a take, and this isn't anything that I've talked about with him, but I
Yep.
thought that they were going to be a takeout target
Interesting. Yep.
for somebody that didn't have a Florida presence
Yeah, I think
for
when we get
sure.
those changes, it's seeming like all gloves are off. Whatever people said in the past and whatever they've guessed is going to happen, including myself. It's just going to be. I think it'll
Yeah,
be a good, crazy, in a good way
yeah,
environment. We
yeah.
just got to
We
get
need it though.
there. Yeah,
because this market would have buoyed. A lot of companies live and die on this market. I mean, this is there's a lot of meat on the bone here, and there's more meat to be had.
Agreed. Well, awesome, Anthony. Thanks for making time.
Yeah, thank you.
Congrats on being a new baby daddy.
Thank you.
What again? Tell me what you're doing next week. You guys are in DC.
We're going to DC. The
event?
the GCRS summit with Artemis Growth Partners.
Okay.
It's got an emphasis on the European market, the rules and regs, how it's progressing. Policymakers and CEOs from Europe are coming to DC. And then we actually have Will Mukey on, managing partner of Artemis today at 4 o'clock on the stream with Shad to
Awesome.
talk about the GCRS.
Very cool.
And,
All right.
and hopefully I get some FaceTime with Don Murphy and Gretchen on Tuesday.
Yeah, they're fantastic. I need to do another tour with them. Following them around the halls is a pretty eye-opening and interesting experience. And no different than how I think Don's like, hey, we need to get politicians to see these, cannabis companies, the retail shops, the grow, all of that. If you have an opportunity to see, how the wheels of legislation, operates within the U.S. Capitol, it's a really interesting experience. And I would encourage you to reach out to donate to Don's, company and have him show you the ropes there. It's an interesting experience.
Yeah, it was an eye-opening experience the first time we went out there. It was something I won't forget anytime soon, seeing how the wheels work in Washington.
Very cool. Well, so everyone tuned in, thank you so much for tuning in to the AlphaNooner show. Don't forget to, of course, watch the Dales Report. Is there a consistent day and time you guys are on?
Monday and Wednesday at 4 p.m., Friday at 11 a.m.
Okay, perfect.
Are the consistent streams.
Tune into the Dales Report as well. Again, thanks for watching, everybody. Anthony, thanks for taking time. And
Thank you.
Tomorrow, Mackenzie will be on with everybody.
Thanks,
guys.
Before investing, carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses found in the prospectus, available at AdvisorShares.com.